Oblivion is the fourth installment in the Elder Scrolls series and my introduction not only to broad open world RPGs in general, but also into the fantasy genre as whole. I have always enjoyed forests and rolling green hills in video games, and this game made by Bethesda was the one that really inspired my interest in large-scale sandbox games. However, even with rose-tinted glasses and nostalgia filter turned on to maximum, I can see why people dislike or prefer Morrowind or Skyrim over this one. Oblivion had roughly fixed level scaling, NPCs with potato faces, inconsistency with the loot system, and a combat that could be described as utterly tedious unless you were min-maxing your character. I thought to myself that there was no way to remedy this, as I was not fan of Obscuro's Oblivion Overhaul or Francisco's mod Aether, with each other trying to revamp the level scaling and loot, yet neglecting how long and boring every fight can get. That was until 20th of September 2012, when a Nexus user named Maskar created his own Overhaul mod. He writes, with his own words, "This is an overhaul mod, improving many aspects of the game while maintaining the overall feel of the game and ensuring compatibility with most other mods." This sentence drove me into this mod. I started following its progress over the years and developed a liking for what Maskar was developing. I wondered why there was not any kind of spotlight or suggestion for this overhaul. I did release a mod showcase video about this, but it didn't cover all the details, neither it did take into account the updates that were implemented later. I decided to create this video for a few reasons. To explain plain and simple about all the features Maskar's Overhaul has to offer, how it compares to vanilla Oblivion, and give people a reason to try Oblivion again with this mod. As Maskar himself says on README of his mod, Oblivion uses a unique and powerful player-focused leveling system, creating a challenging and gaming experience independent of player level or location. It however does this rather aggressively, resulting in breaking some immersion. Examples are the lack of any difficult encounters at low level and all bandits wearing high level equipment at high level. This is prime example of reasons people might despise this game. Nothing says bad game design than to have NPCs artificially obtain their rare and powerful ancient weapons and armor without any reason other than your character simply being a high level. But it was not just the armor and items that were leveling up, it was also their stats. This means that anybody who was not building a hard-hitting character had to constantly keep whacking on enemies and see who dies first, the player or the enemy. The same level scaling meant also that all quest items and rewards were based upon your level, and meant that if you wanted to get best item, you had to delay the quest until you were high enough in level. Not besides, you could just wipe through the arena quest size because every person combatant were in your level and everything. I had to say that also. Enemy spawning was predictable in every encounter, rarely moving away from their initial spawn locations. The loot was composed of a few simple items that were level scaling as well. In fact, low level enemies became rare and were replaced by high level enemies, which usually meant the same enemy with more fancy name that dealt more damage and took more damage. Not to mention, it meant that sometimes caves and dungeons would be filled with the same cave bear. The black bear has probably gone extinct, since it's nowhere to be seen. The damage dealing in Oblivion was bad. The health was upscaled for both player and the enemy to such a ridiculous degree that it took minutes to whack at least one enemy, and that is without changing the difficulty sliders either to make it easier or harder. But the worst example is when you will try to do the main quest and go into the titular Oblivion realms. The Daedra were level scaling with you, one of the few creators that level scales, along with the ogres and goblins. This means that they were dealing even more damage than humanoid NPCs did, to the point that you could hit dozens of smacks with a warhammer, while they only need to hit you twice to annihilate your character. This change was reflected upon other NPCs as well, who didn't level scale, being capable of easily killing everything that was not essential. So when it comes to trying to save the Tamriel from Mehrunes region, it is never ogre with vanilla setup. I'm sorry for the pun. One of the first notable things when playing with Maskar's Overhaul is that it introduces a variety of new creatures, but unlike most of the creatures added by mods, there is the addition of passive mobs who don't attack you on sight. It also delevels a majority of the spawns with a system that creates difficulty based upon region. The further away you are from the towns, the harder it gets. Caves and mines are the easiest, while elite dungeons are the hardest. This means that you can meet creatures far above your level, but when you level up, you are still capable of meeting low level enemies. Level scaling can both be location based or player based, and when the player character's level increases, any encounters also increase in difficulty, both in level and group size. Many new creatures spawn in specific locations, most of them being in region based, while others are tied into the terrain they are in. Most notably, wild guars are encountered near Morrowind, whereas giants are both encountered near Skyrim and Valenwood. Water dragons are common around water sources, and swamps contain creatures such as oozes and slimes. This also applies to some undead, giving you a chance to encounter much diverse cast of zombies or skeletons who would come from other races, be they from an enemy list or from someone in specific region. The mod also features rare creatures, which acts as a mini-boss, containing better loot in general and a part of a spellbook, which can be used to combine for a learnable spell. Creatures can also perform new abilities. Mudcrabs can steal weapons or armor and break them. Dogs can bark for nearby NPCs to attract them to your presence. Zombies won't stay dead unless you remember to pick up their brains. And vultures will start to circle around dead bodies. One of the new added creatures is a classic mimic. They come to life the moment you assume you are touching an ordinary chest, just waiting to attack you. The loot is what you would accept, the remains of a traveler who got eaten by it. Maskar also added improvements for NPCs as well. They don't have a level scaling equipment, instead the NPCs have a range of specific levels which they draft their weapon and armor from, but never above or below that. Bandits and marauders usually stick out in this way. Aside from familiar leather and steel, there is also silver, dwarven and chainmail, which gives them a little more impressive category of assets, giving you a chance to get good stuff at lower levels. The risk is that they usually wield it. This means that fights with them can be tough if you want to get their gear. To compensate for the low tier despite the level scaling, upgraded versions of the existing AP NPCs have been included. They are named Outlaws, Plunderers, Plane Summoners and Plague Bringers. Outlaws are a counterpart to bandits, having access to Elven and glance at high enough levels, while Plunderers take the heavy side such as Orcus and Evobidni. This makes it so that they rarely spawn with Daedric equipment. Plane Summoners and Plague Bringers are counterparts for the Conjurers and Necromancers respectively. Their gimmick is that Plague Bringers can give you diseases, while Plane Summoners are fond of conjuring up Daedra as much as they can. The improvement on NPCs also made the vampires a more dangerous foe to tackle, giving Ancient Vampire for their upgraded counterpart. The Bloodsuckers in this mode are not to be trifled with now, as they have a special ability that lets them heal up relatively fast. Only exposing them to sunlight or hitting them with a silver weapon halts their regeneration. In order for the player to obtain high-level gear, named bosses have been included. These NPCs spawn in remote areas and at higher levels can spawn freely around safe areas. They are notable for having a different name and having an unique appearance with a variety of armor and weapons which can also be enchanted. Loot and items were pretty strict in vanilla Oblivion. Maskar focuses on this aspect too. The further you are away from the town, the harder it gets, but the dungeon treasures are much more rewarding. Although most of the items are still based on the level scaling, it can be de-leveled by editing the ini file. However, by default the chance of encountering Daedric quality items is much lower compared to iron and steel at higher levels. NPCs and creatures have been given more varied loot table. They can now carry items depending on their environment. This includes foods and drinks, alchemy ingredients, as well as ores and small gems. Additionally, locked containers have a chance to spawn a small treasure. These range from magical torches that never run out, highly valuable clutter items, or unique weaponry. One of the more convenient loot items are spellbooks, added to spawn wherever scrolls can be looted and are one way to learn spells as opposed to buying them. There's also rune skulls and rune fragments. The skulls act in a similar manner to sickle stones, with enchantments to applied on weapons and armor, while rune fragments are capable of increasing your base attributes and skills. And that's without mentioning about smuggled goods, backpacks, capes, and cloaks that get thrown into containers that were usually empty and not worth investing time to search through. Now dungeons have a chance to include mineral veins and rubble that may contain small jewelry as a treasure. In addition, treasure maps can be found, and it is almost as if you are playing a type of cartography quest to find the treasure in the game world. Another aspect of the mod is the combat. By default, the player receives and deals double the damage. This means fights are a lot shorter in comparison to the vanilla game, even at higher levels. Slayer weapons are a feature that allows certain materials to do more damage, like silver towards undead, elven towards animals, and glass against light armor. These additions make it worthy to include a variety of different material weapons, even if they do lower damage than the much more superior weapon in possession. Archery was updated as well. Normally arrows move with moderate speed in flight. Your character is capable of dodging predators without trouble. In Maskar's mod, however, the quality of the bow and character's marksman skill determine how fast the arrow flies, which can result in nearly undodgeable arrows. And it's not just the damage that's been modified, but also the AI of the enemies. Now NPCs are capable of roaming around the dungeons, making it much more unpredictable where they are located. They have torches so it can be harder to sneak for them. They can pull enemies to fight against you. More than 2 enemies follow you through the door. More than 10 NPCs can be in combat with you. They can heal each other. They can climb over surfaces to get you. They can get alerted from missed spells and or arrows next to them, and they can run away at low health. Now every city has their own notice board, which can include snippets of events that happen in-game. This includes notes about creatures' invasions, houses for sale, wanted lists, and stolen or lost items. These notices come with a wage location of where it is, and after few in-game days it gives a more specific location for the target, so you can easily find it if you happen to miss it. Creator invasion is a feature by Maskar's mod that makes specific regions dominated by certain creatures. These can range from a goblin army to undeads up to creator invasion if the main quest has been progressed enough to unlock the Oblivion gates. This means that regions and their locations can be filled with a creature that had invaded, and change over the time, making transition with the whole thing dynamic and make the game world feel more lively. The mod includes a faction system, and it includes Imperial Legion along with regional factions of Orsinium, Hammerfell, Skyrim, Morrowind, Black March, Elsewhere, and Valenwood. Now imagine Stalker, Clear Sky, but instead of a first-person shooter set in Chernobyl with bandits shouting and throwing grenades at your feet with aimbot accuracy. There is a faction war system. Factions fight with bandits, with other factions, and also against the Legion and against you. In order to join them, you'll have to kill enough of the other factions in order to raise their disposition and to become their member, wearing their faction cloak. Morak Tong has also been included here and is a very secret faction that starts to target player once they join a regional faction or join the Dark Brotherhood. Sadly, I didn't get a glance of them in my playthrough. With Herder's Crook, you can tame animals to be your pet. Speechcraft determines how successful you are at taming a critter and how many critters you can tame as a pet. Some of the pets can be ridden, some of them cast spells, and some of can enter interiors. Crapping pets enables a menu to give orders for them, see information about them, feed them to get healthier and happier. And the more happier they are, the way less they take time to level up. Because you can level up your pets. And feeding them up to keep them happy is the best way to get them biggest XP bonus. In this section I will be covering new additions and updates of the mod, most notably the companion system that can spawn random travelers upon the road which you can hire and have as companion, each coming up with their own personality and morality. Also there is crafting system, but I didn't get to cover that one as well, mostly because I despise crafting systems. However, I must appreciate the effort Maskar has poured into this. The more diverse crafting items on shops and loot, the means of crafting and also what it can produce. There is a lot of extra content on offer here. There is also the addition of climbing to get over walls and surfaces, whistling to attract your pets and draw enemies, faking out death, a skill-based equipment system in attempt to balance out the availability of high-end weaponry, traps on chest, which makes the security skill useful at disarming them, and darker dungeons for atmosphere. And the best of all of these things can be configured through a text file. You don't want spooky spiders in your game, turn them off from the ini. You want to make the combat slower, decrease the damage modifier values. You want NPCs to have static levels, configure them from the ini file. It's one thing to have mod that does a lot of stuff and with kitchen sink included in, but also the fact that you can customize it as you see fit. Disabling the majority of the features of the mod even is really not for this stuff. Because if you really don't like it, you don't need to have it. Just only that one stuff. In addition, all this is done with scripts, which sounds normal, but in layman's terms, it means it will be compatible with most of the mods that do not use the same features. And just in case they do, you can turn them off from the ini file. This mod has been like one of the games I have been excitedly anticipating, but for the reasons of making the game noticeably better. Maskar's mod has a lot of options planned for the future and is still being updated at this day, meaning even more features are on their way. So with all that said and done, grab yourself a copy of Oblivion and play it with this mod for a truly fresh experience.